All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for making the time for this important webinar, this report back from a delegation that we took to El Salvador. My name is Abel Núñez. I am the Executive Director of the Central American Resource Center. I am also the Vice President of Alianza Americas. And just for some housekeeping, first of all, for those that need interpretation, you can go to the bottom of your screen and pick the interpretation button and choose the language. Para todos aquellos que necesitan interpretación al español, por favor, busquen el icono para la traducción y escojan el lenguaje español para poder oír la presentación en español. I want to welcome everyone to hear this report from our trip to El Salvador. Members of the press have been invited, but we encourage everyone to make questions via the Q&A function of the webinar. We will be monitoring those questions, and then we'll share them with our panelists. First, just want to say that the delegation or the purpose of the visit to El Salvador by Congressman Glenn Ivey was a fact-finding mission on the conditions of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's health and safety, and to advocate for his release. As part of the delegation, we met with different stakeholders in civil society to get a deeper understanding of the current country conditions and how those conditions are impacting the people of El Salvador, and what are the implications for the U.S. So as a final reminder, please ask your questions through the Q&A function under the Zoom webinar, so you can hear it in the language that best suits you. And then I just want to add that I am really proud to have accompanied this delegation organized by Congressman Ivey to El Salvador on his visit to advocate for the release and return of Kilmar Abrego García to his family and here to the U.S. So I'll first begin by quickly giving you a brief background of who our panelists are. So first, Congressman Glenn Ivey is an attorney who served on Capitol Hill as chief counsel to Senate Majority Leader, as counsel to Senator Paul Sarbanes during the Whitewater investigations, Chief Majority Counsel to the Senate Banking Committee, and on the staff of Representative John Conyers. He also worked as the U.S. Attorney for Eric Holder, as an Assistant U.S. Attorney, and as Chair of Maryland's Public Service Commission. He was twice elected as State Attorney for Prince George's County, where he worked with the Obama administration to cut crime. He has been a tireless fighter for our community as Prince George's County State's Attorney. He created a first-of-its-kind domestic violence prosecution unit and pushed for a stronger witness intimidation penalties. When the real estate market went south, he established an award-winning mortgage fraud unit that stood up for homeowners. Ivey resides in Prince George's County with his wife, Jolene, and county council member. He has 6 kids, 1 daughter, and 5 sons. His son, Julian, serves as a delegate for District 47A in the Maryland House of Delegates. Congressman Ivey is a graduate of Princeton University and Harvard Law School. But with us in the delegation, we were accompanied also by Jaime Contreras. Jaime Contreras is the Executive Vice President, heads 32BJ's Capital Area District, which has over 20,000 members in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and Baltimore. And the Capital Area members are commercial, government, arenas, and residential cleaners, security officers, airport service workers, and education facilities cleaners and maintenance workers. After serving 3 years in the U.S. Navy, Jaime returned to the Union in 1997 as an organizer, while attending the National Labor College, where he earned a bachelor's degree in labor studies. In 2001, at the age of 27, he became the youngest Latino to hold a full-time elected position at an SEIU local. Jaime has been able to build alliances with growing immigrant communities in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, while bridging the gap between labor and new Americans. 32BJ's Capital Area District's membership has grown from 7,000 workers in 2006, when Jaime was elected as district chairman, to more than 20,000 cleaner, airport workers, security officers, and other maintenance workers. Jaime has also the first Latino president of SEIU's Maryland and DC State Council. He currently resides in College Park, Maryland, with his family, and he's a constituency of our congressman. And then finally, Chris Newman. He is the legal director and general counsel for the National Day Laborers Organizing Network, based in Los Angeles office. He has worked with day laborers since 2002, was hired as Endelon's first attorney in 2004, and since then has helped develop and coordinate Endelon's work to defend and advance day laborers, civil, workplace, and human rights. He was counsel on the coalition lawsuit challenging Arizona's SB 1070 in federal court. Before working at Endelon, he was the founding coordinator of the Wage Clinic and Legal Program at El Centro Humanitario para los Trabajadores, a day laborers work center in Denver, Colorado. He is the recipient of the Academy of Education Development New Voices Fellowship, and he's currently a Transatlantic Forum of Migrant and Integration Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. He earned his JD with honors from the University of Denver College of Law. So I want to thank you, the three of you, for making the time today to speak about your experience in El Salvador. But before I turn it over, and our first speaker will be Congressman Ivey, I want to just encapsulate your presentation, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions as guidance to sort of your report back. And one, what were your expectations before going in country? What did you learn from the delegation? What challenges do you see in the short, medium, and long term for Kilmar Garcia and Salvadorans in El Salvador? How does this impact the U.S.? And how can we, from our position, continue to support the people of El Salvador? So, Congressman Ivey, I turn it over to you for your impressions of your trip.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the introduction, and I want to thank you all for putting this briefing together. I think it's a good idea for us to have a chance to sort of reflect on this and share our thoughts with the public. After we've had a week or two to kind of get a little distance from it and sort of see how things sorted out. Obviously, I did not get the chance to meet with Kilmar. That was a main goal for me. I had spoken with his wife and and she had some messages she wanted me to relay, certainly about his health and that sort of thing. And I had hoped to have a chance to do that. I'd met with or had a chance to talk with one of his attorneys, Chris, in addition to representing him. There are others. And, he's never had a chance to speak to any of his lawyers. It's not the way things should work in these kinds of circumstances. In fact, he might not even know he has a lawyer representing him at this point, or what's going on with his case here in the United States. And so we were hoping to get that information to him so he could make some decisions, and I think find some comfort in knowing that his family's still with him and behind him, and that he's got some legal help. And he's got a lot of support here in the United States too. Having said that, I think we certainly did a good job of focusing the spotlight back on Kilmar, back on El Salvador, back on the Trump administration, back on the case that is moving forward in the courts right now. As many of you probably know, the Supreme Court weeks ago told the Trump administration to facilitate Kilmar's return, and that's so that he could have due process. He was taken out of here in violation of another judicial order that was already in place. The administration admitted from the beginning that they'd made an error in deporting him in the way that they did and not giving him a chance to have a day in court. So the Supreme Court said to bring him back. The court below that, called the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, said the same thing, but in much stronger terms. And the judge that wrote that opinion was a Reagan appointee, very conservative judge, but basically said, I know what due process looks like, and this ain't it. And by the way, Donald Trump, he certainly should know what due process looks like, because he exhausted his. He had like 4 trials, I think, or 4 cases pending. He had 1 full jury trial, appealed it. He had due process in spades, but he's not going to give, Kilmar a day in court. That's ridiculous. So, we put the spotlight on it and continue that focus. I think we also had a chance while we were down there and Abel, you referenced this, to talk with some of the people in El Salvador. There were mothers whose sons and some daughters who'd been disappeared, and they were able to find out where they were. They knew they were in jail somewhere in the country. I think there's 22 or 23 jails spread out across El Salvador. They don't necessarily know where their loved ones are, so they have to try and take mattresses and things, because these aren't provided to the jails where they think they might be, so they have a chance of getting them. And so it's kind of heartbreaking to see. And one mother, never found out where her son was being jailed. Didn't know where he was until his remains were sent back to her for them to bury after he had died. So that's kind of where things stand on that front. Wanted to make sure that Kilmar was healthy and in good spirits. Didn't have a chance to do that, but I think we did accomplish the larger political goals here in the United States and supported the legal goals of what's going on in the courts. Because at the end of the day, I think the courts are moving very impressively on this issue. For Kilmar, for the Venezuelans, there are others. The Trump administration keeps sending people. I think there's a group that was just sent to South Sudan a few days ago. They keep trying to do this, and we have to keep fighting it to make sure that we can stop it, make sure people who didn't get their due process get brought back so they can have it, and make sure that they stop doing it in this way. And by the way, the underlying the Alien Act that they've been using, I think they're using it in an unconstitutional way. It's supposed to be for when the country's in a state of war. The United States is not at war with El Salvador or Venezuela or anybody else for that matter right now. So Trump using this law is illegal, and I think that needs to be shut down as well. I'll pause there. I know we've got Jaime and Chris have a lot of great comments, and I really want to thank them for coming with me on this trip. It was great to have them there. I thought they added a lot, and I appreciate the insights they brought back when we returned back from El Salvador on the trip. So, I'll turn it back to you, but I want to thank them.
Thank you, Congressman Ivey, for your comments. And then, I'll turn it over to you, Jaime, not only as a leader here in the region that represents many Salvadorans, but you as a Salvadoran, can you talk to us again with the same questions? What did you see? What do you think is the importance of this continued relationship with El Salvador, not just through your members, but in the politics of the moment that we're living?
Thank you, Abel and Chris, but also thank you, Congressman Ivey, for your courage in doing this, going to El Salvador to advocate for Kilmar and for our community. Our union, SEIU 32BJ, is one of the largest unions in the country. We have 185,000 members throughout the East Coast, including 22,000 in the capital region. The majority of our members come from 64 different countries and speak 28 different languages. And so for me and for our union, this is personal. This is family. Kilmar was a fellow union member. He's a union brother, and we're gonna be with him until he's released. 32BJ is going to stand for fair treatment of our members, their families, and their communities, and all immigrants. And it's not a secret. I mean, the Trump administration from day one in 2016, when they launched their first campaign, they have been shamefully successful at scapegoating hardworking immigrants, the very same people who keep our offices clean, harvest our food, pick our food, help our transportation systems run smoothly, keep our buildings secure, and our airports running. Those are the very same people that keep our economy strong, and yet this administration has, from day one, been dehumanizing our community, and that's just not going to stand for us. These fathers, mothers, grandmas, taxpayers in our community, these are members, workers who work hard every day. These are the people who, threw the economy on their backs during COVID, when everybody had to stay home. These are the people that showed up to work. And yet they are at risk of ending up like Kilmar Abrego García, having their basic rights of due process denied, in favorable court decisions ignored by this administration. That's what we have in front of us, and we're not going to be silenced, and we're going to keep talking about this. And I'm going to throw in some facts. I mean, while Americans, are suffering economically, we must remember as Americans that immigrants are not to blame for increased costs. In fact, the Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute finds that immigrants pay more in federal taxes than they receive in benefits. They also do not take jobs. They help the economy grow to create jobs. And so those are lies and bullet points that this people use against our community that are not truthful, they're not factual. And immigrants also contribute $1.6 trillion in economic activity and paid almost $580 billion in taxes in 2022 alone. And this is according to the American Immigration Council. So, and just undocumented immigrants, to give you another fact, which make up about 3.3% of our U.S. population, just undocumented immigrants alone contributed $245 billion in spending to our U.S. economy. These people buy cars, they rent apartments, they buy houses, they buy clothes, they buy food. And that's economic boom for our economy. And just in 2022 alone, undocumented immigrants pay $75.6 billion in taxes. And, even folks like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who are not necessarily friends of labor, believe that people who are currently, here legally to work, like TPS holders, over 1 million of them, should remain in the U.S. That includes Dreamers, that includes TPS holders. Even the Chamber of Commerce thinks that these folks should be able to stay. And we had, one local company here, a company by the name of Total Quality, who services many federal facilities and employ hundreds of immigrants who have TPS or temporary protection status, basically said that 26% of those workers are folks with TPS. And if that was ended, they would have to walk and terminate contracts just to avoid breaking the law. So it's ironic that this administration and the people who follow them believe all these lies about the contributions that immigrants make when they're all just simple lies. And the Trump administration is claiming unprecedented power to deport and disappear hundreds of immigrants, regardless of how much they harm their families, the errors, or the cruelty. And this pattern is outrageous and just plain abuse and overreach by this administration. And we're going to continue to call them out until they do right by the workers. So the story of Kilmar, a Marylander who deserves justice, is the story of a system that is really weaponized against immigrants and their families and their communities who really deserve dignity, respect, and justice. So these continued assaults on our democracy and laws and our system of justice, it's not going to stand. No person should be deported to face torture, and no one should be disappear and denied the ability to contact their families or even their lawyers. So Trump is not above the law, and he's definitely not above the Constitution. And so we're not going to be silent. We're going to continue fighting and making sure that the story of Kilmar and the story of the many, many people that we met with in El Salvador who have family who has been disappeared for the last 3 years without any right to see them or even talk to the lawyer, that those stories get out to the public eye so that people can hold these elected officials accountable.
Thank you, Jaime, for your comments. I want to encourage people to continue to ask questions via the Q&A function of the webinar. But next, I want Chris to kind of jump in his impressions, from sort of your legal perspective, what's going on in the country, what's going on here, what are the implications for the long term, and just your general impressions of what you learned when you were in country.
Well, I first just want to start off by thanking you, Abel, and the entire Crescent DC team, as well as Dulce and Alianzas, for this event and for making such a meaningful and impactful tour. And I particularly want to also thank Jaime for going down and bringing the power and voice of organized labor in the United States, which Kilmar's family is a part of. It's been incredibly meaningful for the family and for people in El Salvador, that act of solidarity. And finally, I want to thank Congressman Ivey Congressman Ivey's entire team for sort of their action-oriented approach, and the care in which they went down and sought facts and information, as well as demonstrating the courage and trying to visit Kilmar. I've accompanied now five members of Congress and the Senate down, including first Senator Van Hollen, subsequently Congresswoman Dexter, Ansari, Frost, and Garcia. This was the third trip. I'm hoping there will be more to come. I don't know who's on the Zoom, but we need people to follow the lead and example set by these members of Congress. I represent Kilmar's family in all matters sort of not related to the Fourth Circuit litigation. The first order of business in representing his wife, mother, and brother was just to find out that, if he's still alive, because we know how many extrajudicial killings take place in the Salvadoran prison system. Secondly, to make sure he's getting his health care, and finally, and very, very importantly, given the unique posture of his case, that he be given access to counsel and access to talk to his family, as is required by pretty much every single international law and human rights norm. Congressman Ivey's quite right to say that he probably doesn't know that his case is the subject of White House press conferences and primetime news shows on cable. And it's very important that he know that he's represented by counsel going forward. We haven't heard from or seen Kilmar since April 17th, when he was presented briefly to Senator Van Hollen at the Sheraton Hotel. So we don't know currently where he is, how he's doing, what his health situation is. He had reported that he'd been transferred from CCOT to a lower security prison in Santa Ana. We don't know that that's true. We don't know that he's still there. What we do know is that as of this moment, Kilmar Abrego García is being imprisoned by a combination of the United States government and the El Salvadoran government, despite the fact that he has no charges whatsoever that have been brought against him in either El Salvador or the United States. And he's currently being held in functionally what amounts to a black site. The only charges that have been brought against him have been leveled on Fox News and from the podium of the White House press secretary, with scurrilous lies and defamation about him and his entire family. We are very, very optimistic about the prospects, if the legal system is functioning properly, that he has a positive case. He's been winning at every stage, including having the Supreme Court affirm an order that was itself affirmed by the Fourth Circuit, requiring the facilitation of his return. To the extent that he's ever been offered due process in the United States before, he was wrongfully arrested by a corrupt police officer who later pled guilty to misusing information from a confidential informant. There was no charge brought against him when he was arrested as a day laborer looking for work at Home Depot. He then won his immigration case functionally, winning withholding of removal, gaining work authorization, and entitling him to become a union member in good standing. in the United States. And despite this, he's been called everything from a terrorist to a gang member to an invader to a violent person to a trafficker, to all of these different things, to which we continue to say, if you're going to make those accusations, particularly from the most powerful office literally in the world, then present that evidence not on the Sean Hannity show, present it in court. And that has not happened. And despite that, he again is in prison. We don't know what the end game here is for him or for the other people that have been functionally renditioned to El Salvador. It does seem kind of crazy that people would be held in prison. I mean, for how long? For what? For perpetuity, for the rest of his life? Is he there for a life sentence? And so it's very difficult to understand what the end game of the Trump administration is as litigation is going on. But what I do know is if there's not some positive outcome for Kilmar, we don't even have immigration law in this country. If the so-called oopsie doctrine is allowed to, take effect, and by the way, the oopsie doctrine is a term coined by the Salvadoran president when it was relatively clear to all observing that the Trump administration attempted to kind of circumvent a judicial order by getting people out of U.S. airspace. President Bukele tweeted, oopsie. And again, if the idea that someone who's already functionally won their immigration case, had lawful status, could then be removed, and the U.S. government can just say, well, tough cookies, they're already outside of the country, there's nothing we can do about it. That puts in jeopardy literally every single immigrant who's here on some type of lawful status, because the same thing could happen to them, and it becomes impossible to advise clients about how to best protect themselves during the next 3 years of the Trump administration. Moreover, people tend to look at this as a question of our, coarsened debate about immigration, but really this is a constitutional issue. It's a question of due process, and it just so happens that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is the protagonist in defending due process rights that we all share and that are all currently in jeopardy if his case goes unremedied. And so, I do think it's helpful to note that this is not necessarily an immigration issue. It's a constitutional issue. It's a human rights issue. And one of the things that all the members of Congress have heard when they've been down in El Salvador is that, yes, people in El Salvador are showing solidarity with Kilmar, with Andre, with other cases that have been profiled, but there are tens of thousands of people in El Salvador who are in the same exact position, people who have been in prison without due process whatsoever, and no charges. And I think, I will take a couple of seconds just to end on in terms of a little bit of the historical context of this moment that we're in. The U.S. obviously has been destabilizing El Salvador for decades. And, I'm no expert on that. I'm sure many people on this call are. Most recently, we've been destabilizing El Salvador through our deportation policy, which emphasizes the deportation of felons, not families, in the terms of President Obama when he initiated that policy in 2009. The result has been that we've been exporting criminality to El Salvador. MS-13 is a street gang that was born in Los Angeles and exported to El Salvador. And people are leaving prisons in the United States and going back and being jumped back into gangs. And so we have been functionally turning El Salvador into a metaphorical penal colony for decades. And so it's no surprise that we are now trying to literally turn it into a penal colony for the United States at CCOT. What is also so alarming is that President Trump seems to be importing the authoritarian techniques of President Bukele, who started off, I think a lot of people had high expectations for new ideas, for the hope that he would create public safety. But he basically, has staked his political project on saying that you have to sacrifice due process in order to get public safety. And what every single person we met, all the human rights leaders in El Salvador have said to us is we need to act now in the United States to prevent what happened in El Salvador from happening, which is, the erosion of all of their guardrails and rule of law and judicial oversight, because they can see what is happening. They can see that El Salvador is sort of the ghost of Christmas future for the United States if we are not able to sort of stand up to Trumpism, and we must reject the idea that it is 100% a false choice to say that you can either have public safety or due process. You can have both. And we shouldn't be put in a position where we're cornered to be led to believe that we're defending criminality or any of that kind of stuff. That is not what we're doing. We want, in fact, more public safety through more due process. And the final thing that I will just say, and apologize, Abel, if I go outside of the purview of the webinar today, but I feel morally obligated to mention that my organization, the National Day Labor Organizing Network, is in full solidarity with Ruth Lopez, a prominent human rights lawyer who met with the previous delegations, all of them, Senator Von Holland and all the other Congress people, and has since been imprisoned by Bukele on completely fabricated charges. And again, in this notion of if we're looking at El Salvador as a window into the future of potential authoritarianism in the United States, it's very chilling as a lawyer who works for civil rights and for human rights to see my friend and colleague Ruth currently imprisoned without any remedy. She has a line that has been quoted in El Salvador: "Que tengan decencia," just have decency. And that's been used as a hashtag. I would ask anyone on this Zoom to raise the profile of a truly extraordinary human rights leader in El Salvador and in the hemisphere, Ruth Lopez, who 100% was committed and in fact put her own liberty at risk in order to show solidarity for the migrants that have been deported from the United States. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to show solidarity with her. And so again, the final thing I'll say is we 100% need much more solidarity and exchanges between El Salvador. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that the future of democracy in both El Salvador and the United States is now linked, and we need to act accordingly. So there needs to be more visits down. Hopefully more unions will follow Jaime's lead and example. And send delegations down as well. Hopefully, other Congress people will defy the punditry class by going down and again demanding to see Kilmar Abrego García to make sure that he's alive and to make sure that he knows he's represented by counsel. We can't stop and we can't, frankly, wait and allow the courts to solve the problem for us. We all have to take action ourselves. So with that, I'll stop. I know I ran a little bit over, Abel, and I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate those comments. And I would say that, Congressman Ivey, you were clear to say in the press conference before you left that you were going to meet with Ruth Lopez, and unfortunately, because of her arrest, you couldn't do that. I want to get to some of the questions that the audience have asked. Some are specifically to you, Congressman. The first one is, despite no subpoena power, do you see any leverage to obtain the release of the secret MOU and the $6 million payment? Do you see any options for obtaining it from the Salvadorans?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had Pramila Jayapal led a hearing today, not a formal hearing because the Democrats don't have the authority to call one of those, but an informal hearing that where we brought in witnesses, and one of those was the lead lawyer for the ACLU. And apparently they may have these documents, but they're under seal. And what that means is the court only lets the lawyers look at them and they can't release them to the public. So one thing I was thinking about doing, and I'm thinking out loud, so, I don't know who's on this, but, you'll hear it here first, I guess. I was thinking about seeing if there's a way for Congress to petition the court and ask for permission to see whatever those documents are in the court's discretion. So I don't need to see everything that's under seal. And let me back up a second. The Trump administration is acting like there's a lot of top secret information in this case. There is not. I'm confident of that. It's just part of their show and part of their efforts to drag their feet and try and circumvent any effort to require the administration to bring Kilmar back, and many of these other folks too who've been deported illegally. But I don't need to see everything. The contract, though, we've got a right to see that. We're members of Congress. Congress controls the power of the purse. They're paying, apparently, El Salvador with American taxpayer dollars to house these. Well, house is maybe too generous, but to imprison Kilmar and others. And we have a right to know if that money's being spent well. We have a right to know how much of it's being spent, because it's our job to pay attention to that and keep track of it and shut down the funding if that's appropriate. So I do want to see if we can get that information, because I think it's important not only for Congress to know, but ultimately it's important for the American people to know.
Thank you. There's a question here from Virginia. She's a ex-criminal judge from Venezuela, and talks about how, from the standpoint that, the Supreme Court used a very soft word in terms of facilitate to get them in, understanding that in El Salvador, there's a suspension of habeas corpus, and that our courts don't have authority outside the territory. And in El Salvador, there's a suspension of habeas corpus. Has there been any thinking about using, sort of other international organizations such as the OAS, Human Rights Commissions, to put pressure? Bukele did receive pressure and had to release 8,000 people that were arrested and imprisoned. But any thought about using those international organizations, UN, to kind of put pressure on the government of El Salvador to help in the release of Kilmar? I guess that goes for any of the three of you.
I mean, I'd certainly be open to that support, and I think it should be pursued. However, my bottom line belief is that this is all controlled by Trump. He could pick up a phone and make a call to El Salvador, and Kilmar would be here for dinner tonight if he would do it. And we've seen that they've worked on releasing other people or bringing them back at least, and we know that's been happening. The extradition powers. There was another case recently where I forget which one it was, but a co-conspirator had fled to Poland, and the United States found out about it and had him brought back. And they do it every day. We can do that here too. So I'm all in favor for supporting any of the pressure and the efforts with respect to the government of El Salvador to have these people sent back, and at a minimum make sure that they're all being treated humanely while they're down there. I'm not confident that they are, but at the end of the day, I think the main focus has to continue to be on the Trump administration and making sure we're supporting these judges who are moving towards holding the Trump administration in contempt potentially for violating the Supreme Court order we talked about earlier.
Yeah, there's a question here from William as well. It says that, have you been able to write a letter, send a text message, or call Marco Rubio to get someone under the pseudonym of Christian to be released from El Salvador to do the same thing for Kilmar Abrego García? This is from a document Monday filed in U.S. District Court in Maryland by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security officials, Melissa B. Harper.
Yeah, Chris, you might know more about this than I do, but yes, I think that's right. I mean, they can do these kinds of things when they want to do it. Somebody mentioned today, I think the initials of the person were OCG or OGC, something like that, and that the Trump administration has agreed to bring him back, I think. And then there's that one where Marco Rubio is supposedly intervening to reach out to Bukele directly. You don't need the Secretary of State to bring somebody back to the United States. I mean, like, we do this routinely every day. But let me defer to Chris or Jaime. You all might know more about this.
Well, they certainly can. And immigration attorneys around the country can tell you examples of people who are wrongly removed being brought back. I don't say wrongly deported because Kilmar was not deported. That's not what's happening to him. There are no words to describe it. He was deported when Congressman Ivy and I had Pollo Campero in El Salvador, he would have been eating with us. He hasn't been deported, and they brought him there. They know that they can bring him back. The question is quite right that the ambiguity in the term facilitate has allowed the Trump administration the ability to kind of play legal games to kind of run out the clock. And we're hoping that courts will increasingly provide more specificity as far as what the remedies are, so that there is no wiggle room. I can tell you that my 3 trips down there recently, under no definition of the word facilitate, has the Trump administration taken any steps to de-incarcerate him and to bring him back. There is news being reported right now. I'm slightly distracted, and I'm sure others might be as well. ABC News is now reporting that he is being brought back to the United States to face criminal charges, which is a scenario that we frankly worried about. That they would try to kind of backfill some of these accusations against him. If that is true, that represents a very significant development in this case. We'll have to verify. It's hard to zoom and follow the most recent. But my phone screens are lighting up with news that ABC is reporting that he will be brought back to face some form of criminal charges. What those charges are, who knows? Again, pick the level of just overtly racist defamation that the Trump administration has been involved in terms of accusing him of being, literally everything. I mean, could there be anything worse than a terrorist? They've accused him of being a terrorist. They've accused him of being an invader. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what kind of charges they have ginned up. But I can tell you that we should all treat whatever charges he's being that are being leveled against him with a high degree of suspicion, and we should make sure that he gets a fair hearing in court, because he's clearly not getting a fair hearing in the court of public opinion.
Thank you, Chris. We're coming to time, so I want to be respectful of people's time. Congressman, thank you so much. But I do want to ask one final question that was in that, and we are committing to sending the questions that we were able to get to the panelists, and so that they can respond back, and we'll be publishing their answers. But the question is: President Bukele gave a speech to the country on Sunday, and specifically named visits from Congress members. Will Democrats continue to go? Why should the U.S. be worried about the situation in El Salvador? So I'll give you the last word, Congressman Ivey, to respond to that question.
Well, I mean, we have to keep the pressure on, and I can't speak to for my colleagues, but there's 250 or so Venezuelans that are down there. There are other people who are being, I guess it's rendition, basically sent to these other prisons overseas. I think illegally. I think they're using a statute that doesn't apply here. And I think they're using it against people who haven't committed any kind of offense, no crime. I think 50 or plus of the Venezuelans who were sent to CCOT were here. They had their paperwork in order. They were here in the United States legally, and they hadn't committed any kind of crime or offense in the United States, El Salvador, or Venezuela. And yet they're essentially being held in a posture of life without parole in one of the most dangerous prisons in the world. So we've got to keep fighting that. And we also have to keep fighting to make sure that the Trump administration is held accountable for this. They're sending U.S. tax dollars to pay for these illegal imprisonment scenarios. We've got to make sure we shut that down.
Well, thank you, Congressman Ivey. Thank you, Jaime Contreras, Chris Newman, for going to the country. Congressman Ivey, this is your second time in El Salvador. I think it demonstrates the commitment that you have to the country, but to your constituencies in Maryland's 4th District. I am a proud resident of that 4th District, and I'm very proud that you are my congressman representing me in Congress. Chris, thank you so much. We support everything that you're doing to continue the fight. Jaime, your work in the labor sector is critical, and we have worked together in the past. We will continue to work together to ensure that people, use migration as something of a choice and not as a means of survival, and that due process is what is expected not only here but around the world. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for those that participated in today's webinar. Once again, we will send the questions that we couldn't get to, and we will make sure that they get answered. So once again, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you to the Alianza team, to my team here at Carecen. We wish you everyone a great day and a great weekend.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.